And I want to bring up a few issues that I think were addressed in 1970. And I think most of the delegates and perhaps the people who ratified the Constitution, we the voters, thought were resolved back in 1970 that really today are not resolved and are major problems. They're not kind of day-to-day things that perhaps a statute might be able to resolve, but these are perennial problems that come up year after year and are not really resolved. I think one of the foremost issues is ethics. Illinois has had a very bad problem with corruption in government. We've had a governor who's now scheduled to go to jail. We have a campaign finance system that Comptroller Netsch was a leading proponent of reform, including public financing. But year after year, the system doesn't get better, it gets worse. And John Fritchie here is the sponsor of a landmark law, House Bill 1, passed unanimously, the Illinois House. The Senate won't have a vote on it. They won't schedule a vote on a bill that passed unanimously in the House on a fundamental campaign finance measure called ending pay to play. I think at the very least, we need the initiative power for ethics and campaign financing reforms, because the voters may have strong feelings about reforming a system where the incumbents are reluctant to address it at all. So I think that underlines the need for ethics. I think it also underlines the need for more direct democracy. There is a rather narrow provision in the Illinois Constitution that allows voters to change the structure and procedure of the legislative body, but it doesn't allow voters to address issues like environmental issues, particularly the issues of global warming and having a green way of thinking and a green way of acting in the 21st century. Back in 1970, if you went to buy gasoline, it was 29 cents a gallon. Well, it's a lot more today, and it seems to me that if our Constitution today says everyone has a fundamental right to a healthful environment, and it's the duty of every person to provide and maintain a healthful environment for this and future generations. That's what our today Constitution says, but it doesn't give the people a way to implement that. They have no petition or referendum powers to carry that out. And similarly, in the education article, children and parents, all of us have a fundamental right to education, to our full development of our capacity. But I think we all know that Illinois has a very unfair system for financing education. Year after year, there are attempts in the legislature to address this, unsuccessful for 37 years. After a while, voters have to say, is the current mechanism for addressing school finance and the key way of giving equal opportunity to everyone in our society, is that system that we have now at the legislature ever going to reform property taxes? We have a heavy reliance on property taxes that aren't based on ability to pay. Indeed, our whole revenue structure in Illinois is very regressive, not based on ability to pay. The delegates of the Constitution, by compromise in 1970, agreed to a flat rate income tax. Well, that's not fair. Check with Teddy Roosevelt or Abraham Lincoln. Taxes should be based on ability to pay. The income tax should be progressive. We don't have that and can't have that in Illinois absent a constitutional amendment or a constitutional convention. And to finish up, a constitutional convention that would be approved by the voters in 2008, in my opinion, I think most voters' opinion, would not go in and rewrite the whole document. There's maybe a half a dozen to a dozen areas that need attention. The delegates have the power to propose amendments to those particular areas. And then the voters, one by one, could vote on those areas. There are some that feel the voters will rewrite the Bill of Rights. I happen to trust the people. I think the voters of our state and our country understand the importance of privacy and fundamental rights. So the notion that they're going to take away rights from the people of Illinois, I think, is misplaced. What happened in 1970, and which we ought to think about today, is a whole new group of people came in, including Senator/Controller Professor Netsch, who were not part of the regular political process. They were not in there in the tug and maul of the legislature of 1970. They were elected in a nonpartisan election. Nobody had a party label. They were elected on their personal abilities, their merits. And some very special people came out of that. A good friend of ours, Mary Lee Leahy, was a delegate to that convention, and she introduced the environmental article. She never would have been, slated by the regular political process. And I think we need to sort of look at this as an opportunity to bring those fresh people, new ideas to the fore. The delegates have to propose amendments by majority vote. The voters then have to approve that. And I think that would be a very healthy way of ending the gridlock we have in Illinois rather than continuing it.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Next, I think we all would like to hear from Representative Fritchie on what he has to say, since it is his resolution, and it's very important that you listen kind of clearly to what he has to say, because he does have senior over me, but he does these things from the heart. It's not something that he just puts down, someone tells him to do. So please, Representative Fritchie.
Lord knows how I became one of the old guys down here, but it's going to sound somewhat trite, but I've got a ton of respect for everybody I'm sitting up here with. I want you all to do me a favor and take your municipal league hats off for a second and think of yourselves as residents of the state of Illinois. My family's from Richland County. They have been for 5 generations. I grew up in the city of Chicago, downtown. I've got faith in people from one end of the state to the other to do the right thing. I've got more faith in the people than I do in most of my colleagues. I spent 11 years down here. We've done a lot of good things. We've done some bad things. We haven't done some things that we should do. When you look 20 years ago and see some of the reasons they were proposing a constitutional convention then, they talked about the legislature's inability to deal with education funding. They talked about the means by which we assess property in Illinois. They talked about the issues of corruption in government. When I filed House Resolution 25 at the beginning of this session, among the items that I delineated as reasons for a constitutional convention were educational funding, honest government, how we assess property in Illinois. The first paragraph of the resolution was probably the most telling in my mind, and let me just read it to you. It's 3 lines long. Whereas for reasons known and unknown, the General Assembly has been unwilling or unable to tackle some of the most significant problems facing the state of Illinois. I want you to think about that for a second. For reasons known and unknown, they've been unwilling or unable to tackle these problems. Ladies and gentlemen, elected officials, by and large, think on 2-year and 4-year election cycles. The problems that confront this state are not dealt with neatly in 2-year and 4-year election cycles. They're dealt with on 5-year cycles. They're dealt with on 10-year cycles. When we look at our educational system, and every year that we watch our educational system slide, and we are 49th or 50th in the country when it comes to funding disparity in Illinois, that is not something that we are going to make up in a 2-year or 4-year cycle. We have seen Blue Ribbon Commission after Blue Ribbon Commission propose how we get out of it. They all keep coming back to the same general idea, which is what Dawn ran her campaign on, which was a tax swap. And if somebody doesn't support a tax swap to fund education, come up with another idea. The idea of doing nothing is gone.